Hey, what's going on? This is Derek, and in this tutorial, I'm really excited. In fact, I'm so excited that I talk way too fast the entire time, and I'm sorry, but just hang with me if you can, all right? We're gonna learn about the brush tool, and specifically, we're gonna make this Facebook cover image. I'm gonna show you how I made all of those textures from scratch for this graphic here and how to apply them using the brush tool in Photoshop. And one thing I want to say real quick is a lot of people think that you have to have a Wacom tablet kind of like this. This is the Intuos Pro medium tablet. It comes with this super awesome pen. It's pressure sensitive, so depending on how hard you push on it, your brushes can have different levels of opacity, and you can even, depending on what angle you have it at, your brushes will rotate. It does some really cool things, even drawing this way, and then you can flip it this way and it turns into an eraser. It's awesome. If you can afford one, you want to get one. They are an awesome tool to have and to use, but you really don't need one. And in fact, I would say 99% of the time I'm using the brush tool in Photoshop, I'm just using the mouse or maybe even the trackpad on my laptop. So what I want to do in this lesson is show you exactly how I use the pen, not the pen tool. I was thinking pen, I was looking at this. Okay. No, show you how I use the brush tool. And we're going to make a Facebook cover image, and that way you can apply these skills immediately and create your own graphic for that, or maybe Instagram or whatever. And I'm going to show you how to make your own custom brushes, as well as where to find some high quality purchasable brushes. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so what we're going to do first is just make a new Photoshop document. So I'll go over here and click Create New, and we are going to make this 851 pixels wide by 315 pixels tall, because if you search for how big or what Facebook cover image sizes are, you'll see right there, 851 by 315. So let's jump back into Photoshop and hit Create. Now, before I do that, actually, let's notice I've got artboards turned on, and that's so that way I can also create an Instagram graphic on the same canvas later. So right now I've got this one artboard for our document. So what we're going for here, let's just take a step back and look at some of these things. So I jumped onto Pinterest and I did a quick search and found some different graphic design samples where you could see this cool poster, this blue image on the back with this kind of like ink shape brushes is something you could easily do with the Photoshop tool. And for something like that, you could either search for free brushes, or there's this watercolor brushes set right here on the Creative Market. And you know what? I'm going to open this up in a new link so I can add that to the link in the description. But the point is, and I'm not trying to sell, I'm not trying to get you to like buy brushes and stuff. I'm just trying to show you where the resources are. So let's jump back into this design sample. So there's one idea. Here's another one down here where we've got all kinds of different textural elements that we can achieve with the Photoshop brush tool. Here's another sample, this Bob Dylan poster. So if we look closely on the edges, we see there's some little bit of like grunge and distressing, and that's something that you would achieve with a Photoshop brush. So let's go ahead, and what we're going to do is make something kind of like this Bob Dylan poster. We're going to make it real quick, real simple, so you can kind of get the point here. So let's, first thing, let me just take a breath because I know I'm going way too fast, but I get really excited about this stuff. So we're in Photoshop. We haven't done anything yet. I'm going to hit the letter B to get my brush tool. All right. And I got to make sure I'm actually on this first layer, so that way I can paint with my brush. And what we're going to do is find, if you open up your brushes window, and if you don't see this tab here, just come up here to window and open up this brushes window. Okay, so we've got brush settings and we've got brushes. So you'll probably want to start with brushes, because this is where you'll pick the main, look of your brush, whether it's a soft round, which is something I use for selections, or a hard round, or I've got a lot of preloaded grunge textures, and I wish I remembered where I got them all. I wish I kept better track of them. But what we'll do is I'll show you how to load custom brushes, and I'm just going to jump in here real quick and show you the principle of how to use it so you can take off and run with this, or stick around and I'll show you how I make these things. So first and foremost, what we're going to do is just make an image for my Facebook cover. So there's a few ways to do it. One is we'll throw a color in here, any kind of color, doesn't really matter. So up here in my colors window, I'll click on this red color, which throws it to my foreground swatch. I'm going to hit Alt or Option Delete on my Mac. If you don't see that, come over here to Edit in your window, down to Fill, and you'll see on your PC, your Mac, or whatever you're on, what the shortcut is to do that. All right, so we've got red here on my main layer 1, and I could also jump back to my brush tool and paint right on top of that same layer, but because Photoshop has layers, we want to make this as non-destructive as possible. So I'll make a new layer by clicking down here next to this trash can, hit the letter B to get my brush tool pulled back up. And right now I can't see it. And the reason why, it's actually probably just so big that it's not fitting on my screen. And that's true. Okay, so what I did there, I hit the left bracket key. It's the key immediately to the letter P on the keyboard. So the left bracket makes it small, right bracket makes it big. If you don't see that, you can click up here in your options bar. There's a little drop down arrow, and you'll see that you've got this size right here. You can actually scrub, click on the word size and scrub left and right to change the size of your brush, okay? We can also change the rotation of our brush by clicking and dragging on the circle. We can change the rotation as well as if it gets crunched down or not, all right? So anyway, so with this brush selected, what I'm gonna do, and actually now that I don't want it turned this way, and I can see these options over here in the brush settings as well. So you still have the size picker down here, which might be a little bit easier to see. And by going to this window instead of up here in your options bar, we can see down below a preview of what the brush is gonna do. So we can do things like add spacing to it. So every time you click or drag, it actually, it spaces out how the brush gets applied. I'm gonna rotate this back to where my brush, let's see. Try it that way. All right, so that's close. I'm going to scale it up a little bit, and what I'm going to do now is come back to the, I'm going to close this window. I'm going to come back to this color picker swatch with this red. If it's changed on you, just hit the eye to get the eyedropper tool and select anywhere on that color, and that way it'll reload your color down here in the foreground swatch. I'm going to click on that, and all I want to do is drag it down just a little bit, so just a little bit darker than the base, okay? Not much. I'm gonna hit the letter B to bring that brush tool back, and then I'm gonna hit the right bracket to kind of scale it up again. And so now what I can do is gently, and see, I'm on the wrong layer, so you really gotta pay attention. Jump back up to layer 2. I'm gonna brush on here a little bit, and I can't see anything that's changing. So one thing we gotta pay attention to up here in my options bar, my opacity is turned all the way down from a previous project. So I'm gonna scale that back up to 100%. And now as I start to paint on here, and this might be a really bad example for you to see in this lesson. I like to work with really subtle textures, but I'm going to make this a little more extreme just so you can see it, okay? So as I click on here, you can see I'm starting to paint in the edges, and depending on your brush, you know, so I just, again, this is why I don't use a Wacom tablet, because I'll hover where I want and then click once. I don't want it to click and drag and make a really weird, see how it kind of like adds these, it just doesn't look right, okay? So I'm gonna hit Command, Option, and Z to undo that. Hit the letter B to get back to my brush tool. And this is okay. I mean, this is not bad, but we wanna take advantage of some of the options of the brush tool. So we're going to jump into my brush settings, okay? And you'll notice down this whole left-hand side here, we have a lot of different things we can do to this brush. So we have things like shape dynamics. So for example, I can jitter the size. So if I turn this up a bit, my size of the brush will change all over the place, and I can make the control off so it just does it basically on its own. So let's see if so as I click, see how the brush is changing sizes randomly all over the place, okay? I can also make this pen pressure sensitive. So if I'm using that Wacom tablet and I push really hard, it'll get bigger or smaller depending on how hard or soft I'm pushing, okay? Or by the tilt of the pen. So that's a really cool option that's built into Photoshop to work with your tablet. But again, you can just turn that off and it'll do it randomly, okay? But I don't really want to do size jitter. I want to turn that off. What I want to do is the angle jitter. So I'm going to drag this up a little bit, okay? And I actually showed this in one of my lessons in the graphic design bootcamp course, and people are like, how in the world are you rotating your brush so fast? Well, it's by that angle jitter. So I'm coming back over to my brush settings, down to shape dynamics, and we're turning on this angle jitter, okay? So what happens is, I'm gonna delete this layer so we can see it again. I'm gonna add a new layer. Yes, delete layer 2. Let's make a new layer. All right, so what happens is every time I click, my brush automatically rotates a little bit. And by doing that, we're gonna create a much more natural looking texture, okay? So as I kind of burn in these edges of this graphic here, I can just keep clicking away and I don't have to worry about it you know, starting to look like a pattern because you see the same edges over and over. All right, is that, you tracking with me? I hope you're tracking. Anyway, so I kind of create this textured image right here, okay? And I can just kind of keep working, you know, maybe burning in the edges a little bit, right? And just kind of darkening things up just over and over, okay? So there's one background, there's one way to work. Another thing we could do to create more interest with this, let's jump back into that Bob Dylan poster real quick. So you'll notice that there's textures over over the background image, as well as like kind of cut into the fonts as well. So one way we could do that is, let's say we wanted to put a title in here, and I'm just gonna be really creative with this one. We're just gonna type my name in here. Okay, so we'll put that in there, and I'm gonna hit Command A, which is the same as going up here to select all. And what that does is it throws the marching ants all the way around your whole artboard. I've got my text layer selected, and now it gives me the options with the move tool selected over here. In the options bar, I have these alignment controls. So now I can throw this to the center, horizontally and vertically. So now my text is dead center. All right, I'm gonna hit Command D, as in deselect, or come up here to select, deselect. All right, boom. Now I'm gonna click on my Derek text layer, and I'm going to add a layer mask down here. You see next to this little FX thing. And now, because I'm working with a mask, I want to paint with black to hide, or paint with white to reveal. So we're not affecting the text at all. We're just going to be hiding what shows up with this mask. So I'm gonna hit the letter B to get the brush tool. All right, and one thing you might run into is you'll be like, I can't see my brush. What in the world is going on? Well, if you hit the caps lock key, if it's turned on, it hides what the brush preview is. If I turn it back off, now I can see the brush again. All right, so now as I click on this layer with black, you'll notice over here, I don't know if you can see it in this layer, but I'm starting to add black to this, which is then knocking out the text a little bit and kind of adding that texture to it. So this is one example of how, I mean, you can kind of see the process by masking or by painting with these brush textures, how you could achieve something kind of like this on this Bob Dylan poster. So we could take that one step further, and maybe we want to create a more pattern type brush. So what I'm going to do is hit the Command key and click right on the letter T here for this text layer. And now you'll see that it made the selection around my name. So what I can do now is come up here to Edit and go down to Define Brush Preset, and I'll click on that. And you can name it whatever you want, and then click OK. So I've already done this once. I don't want multiple brushes with my name in it, so I'm going to jump back over into my brushes window, scroll all the way to bottom because that's where it adds these brushes, and I'll click on there. And there is my Derek brush. So what I can do now, this is kind of a weird sample, but you get the point. You could do this with like leaves or grunge textures, or I don't know, shapes. I don't know, animal shapes, whatever the heck you want to do. You can make a brush out of anything, and it will paint with whatever my foreground color is. So it's painting with white. And I've got a new layer over here, so I'm not messing up everything else below it. I can come back over to my brush settings. Let's turn on the shape dynamics. Maybe change the angle jitter a little bit, okay? And now every time I click, it rotates that brush. And I can do this a ton, and I do this kind of stuff all the time where like it's kind of a cool textural element. You know, it gets to the point where you can't even tell what it was originally. Maybe I'll hit the letter, let's see. What do I want to do now? That was a lot. That was way more than I planned on. I'm gonna hit the letter X, and I'm gonna start painting with black over the top. Okay. So it's kind of getting a little crazy, a little really crazy. Actually, I'm gonna make this smaller. Maybe hit the letter X again, and now I'm building over the top of this again. And so this is where it kind of feels like I'm really painting. Where you're just kind of like layering things over the top of each other. And if you're working this way, just pay attention to which layers you're working on so you don't accidentally get committed to something that you don't like and can't undo. But what I would do with this, I mean, this is kind of a weird sample, but you know, build something cool like that. And then what I could do is maybe drag this all the way to the background and work with my blend modes here. So I'm going to change it from normal maybe to multiply, and then maybe fade it back to like 50%. So I've got the move tool selected, which if I just hit any of the number keys, so at the number 5, you'll notice my opacity jumps from 100% down to 50%, or maybe even 3 for 30%. So I've got this really cool textural element, and it adds depth to your design without really having to do much. I mean, all we did was work with a couple brushes here, and that's kind of a cool graphic. I don't know if I didn't necessarily put this on my Facebook cover image, but hopefully it gives you some ideas of ways that you can incorporate textures into your designs. So now what I want to do, this tutorial is getting kind of long, and I knew it would. Now I want to show you how to actually create some texture brushes. So if you don't want to go buy some of those textures and you want to actually create something from scratch, here's what you can do. So I'm going to show you the poor man's way to make Photoshop brushes with textures and stuff. So jump on over to textureking.com. All right. And you can work with just about any texture options. I already have this one that I found and I pulled up this image here. So I'm going to take a step back to the homepage of Texture King so you can see what I see. And this will change all the time. I mean, these images are always kind of different, but what I'm looking for is something, you know, like this one right here. It's got these white pieces, or this guy here. You'll see in a second how this works and why I chose these images, but I'm going to grab this image. I'm going to bring it down. I'm just going to click and drag over into Photoshop. You could right click and save it as an image and bring it into Photoshop. However you want to get it in there. We're just going to click open the image. So I have this image in here now. And what I want to do is go to Image, Adjustments, and down to Threshold. Yeah, that's what I want. All right. Image adjustments down to threshold. And what we can do now is it basically turns into a black and white image, and we can drag this slider. So keep in mind when you make a brush, black hides. So it would be painting this entire image with black if I left it like this, and white reveals. So just kind of, you know, as you practice with this, you'll get a better understanding of what you're doing. But, you know, I want something that's not too harsh like this. I want just subtle, just a subtle brush. I'm going to bring it in about like that. Okay, I'll hit OK. And if, let's say you wanted to do the opposite, all I have to do is go hit Command I or Control I, and that will select the inverse. So if I come over here to Image, let's see, there it is, Invert. There we go. So Image, Adjustments, Invert. Okay, so probably Control I on that PC of yours or Command I on a Mac, and that will just flip or completely make the opposite whatever layer you're on. It'll work with colors too. So hit Command I again, and that way you can control how much of your image is black or white for the brush. Okay, so now what we're going to do, I'm going to hit Command A to select all. And one thing to keep in mind, this brush is going to be almost 3,000 pixels wide. If I look at the top here and I have this ruler, if you don't see that, hit Command R, go to View, and down here to Rulers. You can see that. The only reason why I bring that up is if you're going to do a print-based project and you're working with brushes, you want it to be big enough that your details stay intact. But if you're doing like something for the web, you can get away with smaller sized brushes. So just something to pay attention to as you make custom brushes, okay? So now with this whole thing selected, I can either select the whole thing as a square, and I'll go to Edit, Define Brush Preset, and we'll just call this Derek's Grunge Brush 1. I don't know, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just for you to know what it is, okay? And now the other thing I could do, I'm gonna hit Command D to deselect that selection I had. And this time I'm gonna hit the letter L to get my lasso tool. And this time I'm just gonna select this little piece of texture right here. All right. And I'm gonna go to Edit, Define Brush. And now I'm gonna call this Derek's Small Grunge Brush, okay? All right, and then you could even go like this and make a rectangle selection. So I'll come over here to this rectangle selection tool, and maybe I'll just draw like a tall, skinny selection here, okay? And I'll make this, we'll go to Edit, Define Brush, and we'll call it Derek's Tall Grunge Brush. Boom, okay. So now I've got a few different brush options I just created from here. I'm gonna bounce back over to this document, and hit the letter B to get my brush tool. I'm gonna make a brand new layer and throw it all the way to the top. So hit Command Shift, and that right bracket key, that's the one that's not, the one next to the letter P, all right, on your keyboard, you have the left and right bracket. Let me just show you. Image, I'm losing my mind. There we go. Okay, down to layer, we go to layer, down to arrange, and then you see where it says bring to front, that. Command Shift and that key. That's what I did there. That's the shortcut to bring that layer all the way to the front. All right, so now we got this layer up top. I'm gonna hit the letter B to get my brush tool. I'm gonna jump over here to my brushes window and scroll all the way to the bottom, and you should see the 3 new brushes that I made. So I've got Derek's Grunge Brush 1. I'll click on that. Okay, we'll close that window. And you can't see it, 2 reasons. One, I had my caps lock was turned on, and depending on the size of your brush, it might be so big you have to scale it down. All right, but I've got this on layer 1. I'm gonna click once to throw some texture over here, and maybe hover over here, and my mouse comes off screen, so I've got to move my artboard. So I can either click on the hand tool, or I can hit the space bar, which is my shortcut to get that hand tool, or I can hit the letter H, and I can just move my canvas over a little bit. Click the letter B again to come back, and now I can click once down here in this corner and add some more texture to that. And this is a lot more texture than I would usually want to add to it. So there's a few things I can do. Again, I can dial back this opacity by hitting like the number 4 maybe to bring it back to 40% or maybe 20%. That's not bad. That adds more depth to it. Or I can leave it at 100%. I'll hit the letter, man, I keep calling them, yeah, sorry guys. The number 0, right? I put the number 0 on my keyboard, and that brings it back up to 100% here. And then what I can do, hit the letter V to get my move tool selected, and then hit Shift and plus or minus to toggle through my blend modes. So right here in the layers panel, we've got these blend modes which change how the layers interact below. So I can just cycle through real quick. I'm holding down the Shift key and I'm just hitting plus or minus to cycle through and just see what it does in the different blend modes, okay? So I'm, just for the sake of showing you things, let's make it this one. All right, so soft light is kind of a fun one to paint with. And so it adds a little bit more to that texture as well. Okay, so now let's go back and let's add another layer on top. Hit the letter B to get the brush tool, and this time I'm going to change it over to that tall grunge brush that I made. And now I can, first I don't see it, so I'm going to scale my brush down a little bit, hitting that left bracket key. And I could start doing things like, you know, painting on the side here. This is a little more of a selection than I would prefer. I'd rather have kind of a sliver. Let me show you a better sample of that. I've got a preset brush, and let me scroll here a little bit and we'll see what we've got. I don't know where it's at. Whatever. But the point is, I've got a brush that's like it's like just a couple pixels wide, and it's really nice to add almost like creases to things. So it almost looks like it's a paper fold. But we can do that as well. Okay. And then the last thing I want to show you is if I come over here to brushes, and I've got this little window, button up here on the top right of this brushes window, I can click on that. And you've got a lot of options for your brushes. So this could be where you import brushes, or you can export your selected brush if you want to save it and send it to somebody else. You can restore your default brushes. Don't do that. If you do that, it'll get rid of all these other brushes you've brought in. And if you're like me and you don't know where you got them, then you won't know how to get them back. So I'm going to click on import brushes real quick. And that's where I could find, if you downloaded some of these samples that I showed you at the beginning of the lesson, you would click import brushes, and that's how you'd get them into Photoshop. Or I'm going to click on get more brushes right down here. And it's going to open up adobe.com and take you right to a page where if you've signed up or you're logged in, you'll see all kinds of awesome brush sample packs. So we've got watercolor, dry media, spatter, all kinds of stuff. You might really like these halftone brushes. These could be great for some of that texturing stuff. All right, so definitely take a look at those. You can download those brushes and kind of do what we've done here. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this tutorial short. I was going to show you some other things, but I realize it's getting long. So I hope you learned a lot. If you have any questions, I flew through that, and I know I did. So ask them below in the comments. I'd love to answer your questions, and I'll be making a lot more tutorial videos soon. So thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget, subscribe, hit that bell so you get notified when I do launch those new videos. All right, thanks, guys.